this budget workshop to order. My name is Kristen Bedell and I'm the Finance Committee Chair. It's Wednesday, February 21st, and we have a few items up for review tonight, starting with a review of the technology budget. And I assume we're going to hand that over to Mr. Rivers.
Actually, it's probably reversed, and I apologize.
Reversed is fine. We can do that too. We'll start with review of dues and fees.
Sounds good. Okay, good evening, everyone. Sorry for any confusion on our agenda, but tonight we will be reviewing actually the balance of the fiscal year 25 financial plan that we presented to you. And yes, we will be getting to the technology budget, but we're also going to be reviewing educational supplies, the equipment budget, and dues and fees. So the areas of your budget will be the section 600s, 700s, 800s, and specifically we'll be reviewing these object codes, 611, 640, 41, 42, and 690. And then under the 700s, 730 and 739, followed by dues and fees, and then other accounts in the 800 section. And then lastly, Mr. Rivers will be talking about his technology budget that can be found on page 151 in your budget book, and we'll remind you of that when we get to it. Okay, so Object Code 611 includes these instructional supplies that are directly related and used in our educational settings, along with nurse supplies. And this area of the budget is broken down in your budget books from page 98 through 105. Throughout these accounts, you will notice a number of increases and reductions. The primary reason is that school and department requests are based on need. For example, one year the math class may need some new supplies, whereas perhaps the English class needs a little bit less that year. But I think it's important to note that all schools receive an equalized per pupil allocation. So we take our per pupil enrollment number, we take our enrollment number, we give a per pupil amount for all of these supply accounts. So it's equalized amongst our elementary schools, then our middle schools, and then our high schools. So instructional supplies for our schools are basically level funded, and looking at this you're like, no they're not, but they are, because that first line of instructional supplies includes a $400,000 appropriation that has been set to help us pay for Science of Reading, which is a state mandate, and I know you've heard a lot about the program. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because that expense we feel we may be able to remove from the budget request, which is a good thing because we are identifying other grants that we can utilize to pay for that. Object Code 640 includes all the workbook accounts, and there's a minimal increase here that's primarily due to the elementary accounts that have either an increase in the number of students by grade and also some increased costs. This is broken down on page 107 and 108 in your books. Object Code 641 is textbooks, and that's page 110 through 115. And there's an overall reduction to these accounts, as we really did ask our schools to analyze their needs, to look at historical data in replacing textbooks, because that's primarily what this account is for. When there is a new curriculum and new textbooks, those are purchased through a district account. So the schools themselves estimate what they're going to need throughout the year. And we have noticed that we really weren't spending as much as they were asking. So we've asked them to take a harder look. They did. There's some reduction. And we will be recommending a further reduction to this account of $14,470. we actually identified an error where we had a duplicate entry for math books, both in a district account and in our high school accounts. So again, we're always looking at these numbers, and sometimes that happens, but I'm happy to say not very often. But the 14,470 will be a reduction. 642 is on page 116, and this is reflecting an overall decrease. And I don't want anyone to be concerned about library books. We really have done an outstanding job over the last few years of supporting our libraries, and we've been able to do that through some of our year-end balance in our general operating, but also through some of our grants, and particularly ESSER. So they are really in good shape, and there has been a shift in other areas of their budget as a result. 690 is an area of the budget that overlaps. So as you can see, it does note computer supplies, which Mr. Rivers will talk about, and custodial supplies that Mr. Ruggiero did speak to you about last week. The office supply account funds copy paper and other supplies for office use, and of course, copy paper just continues to increase in cost, and that is reflected here. This is on page 119, by the way. And the transportation supply account reflects a slight decrease, and that's due to the current bid price of fuel for our buses. We do have a locked-in price, but only through October 31st of 2024. So it doesn't get us through June of 2025. So we are making some guesstimates on what we'll be looking at from that point. We are trying to work with the town so that we can go out to bid through June. It would help our budgets. And I think that's what we're going to try to do next time around. So, but for now, we just made our best guesstimate. And fortunately, when we locked in, that began last November, we were able to save some money because the per gallon price did decrease. And lastly, the athletic supply accounts have been basically level funded for fiscal year 25. So that brings us to the equipment accounts in object code 700, page 126. Again, the computer equipment here will be reviewed through the technology budget review. And Ms. Borges covered the Pupil Services equipment account last week. So I will discuss the instructional equipment. These accounts include requests from the art music coordinator and include funding for musical equipment replacement, sound equipment technology, and art equipment. As you can see, there is a reduction in this area of the budget as we have been able to support the purchase of art and music equipment over the last couple of years, again, through the budget and through grants. The other equipment, object code 739, includes furniture, which is primarily replacement equipment. Most of our large purchases of furniture are requested through the capital budget, but we've always had smaller accounts within our operating budget for chairs that might break or student desks that might need to be replaced through the school year. And the reduction that you see overall here is due to the health furniture account that Ms. Borges discussed last week. And as I said, Mr. Ruggiero discussed the custodial equipment last week as well. So that brings us to the 800 section, which is page 135. It includes dues, fees, and other expenditures, such as the continuing education budget. You will notice that there is a significant reduction in continuing ed, and we did have a placeholder in that line item last year because we needed to fund a match for 21st century. It was the 5th year and the final year of that 21st century grant. So at this point, we do not have a match to make for fiscal year 25. So we were able to reduce by that amount of money. So what you see here is the continuing ed subsidy that we are required to fund. And then dues and fees are a combination of various fees that we pay to be members of all kinds of organizations, many of which our students benefit from, such as the National Honor Society, NEASC, CIAC. Many of us are members of our own professional organizations, the Superintendent's Association, the Curriculum Development Associations. School business officials have both national and local state of Connecticut associations. I happen to serve on a committee for the National ASBO. So that is what this account entails, both for districts and for individual schools. Okay, I'm going to pause here, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to address them before I turn this over to Mr. Rivers.
Mrs. Lance?
Pam, do we still service Trumbull with continuing ed?
Yes, we do.
Approximately, what kind of numbers are we talking about?
I don't know the exact number of students, but we have been working with them over the last couple of years to make certain that they were paying a fee that adequately covers our costs, because that needed to be readjusted. And I want to say it's probably around 60 students at least, but don't hold me to that. I'll get the exact number for you.
And the money comes directly to the Board of Ed?
It does. It does. It offsets our costs.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up to that question, what does that 150 cover? If we're removing the match from the 21st century, what does that 150?
Yeah, the 150 is our portion as a district. It's a subsidy that we pay towards continuing ed. We get a grant from the state of Connecticut, and that 150 is combined with that to pay all the fees and costs associated with the continuing ed program, and that is separate. We pay that separately. We do not pay that through the general operating budget.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Hennick?
Figure out where I was here. So in the dues and fees, I think you gave me a breakdown of 72,480, which I believe came out of that as well. So we have Stratford Rotary, $300. Is that an educational organization or?
What you had requested was one specific account within this line. So when you go to the dues and fees,
Yep.
on page 135, and I'm going to get there as well, so you will see backup pages as well.
Mhm.
So 137 does a breakdown, but go over to page 138 if you would.
130 what?
138. And you will see dues and fees,
Right.
broken down by elementary, middle, the high schools, special education, and then admin. Admin is the one that you're speaking of right now. That was what I provided the board with a complete breakdown as requested.
Mhm.
And that's 0760. So some of those accounts, I'm gonna get there as well. So things such as the Stratford Rotary, I know was in a contract. I believe it might be the superintendent's. I know it's actually in mine to be a member, but I am not. So the district has always in the past required somebody from administration to participate in Stratford Rotary.
It's in how, it's specified in
Personnel contracts.
the superintendent's contract?
I'm not sure about that. I just know I've seen it in mine.
So, I mean, we have $72,000 worth of various organizations, and weather information, $1,000.
Yeah, that's been the same price, and I can go back to about 20 years ago.
Well, what is it?
That is the gentleman who guides us for weather calls.
Yep, so we have a group, the Southern group and all the different groups, and it's the same person. He gets $1,000 from each district, and he guides us for school cancellations and kind of make sure that we're all on the same page. He sets up those 3 a.m. meetings, 4 a.m. meetings to talk about whether you're going to have a delay. He provides us all the updates up until then so that the districts surrounding us and ourselves are all on the same page. And he does that all year long for the $1,000.
And all these other organizations, CT Association for Personnel, National Superintendent Round, the CT Post, subscriptions, is that for the library? What is?
Those particular are here in the admin center. The newspaper is delivered for Connecticut Post, the Register, and the Hartford Current. Connecticut Association for Personnel and the HR Association obviously is part of the HR department. Again, professional organizations that for that fee do all kinds of free professional development through meetings.
And CES and Center for School Change, are those? I mean, there's a ton of associations we belong to.
Right.
You know, and year after year, these numbers start to add up. Various memberships, Education Week, ASCD, CAP, CAS. I mean, how much value does it provide to the educational environment to be associated with all? I mean, personally, I'd rather hire another teacher that belongs to all these organizations. Joe, how much value does it add to be associated, and is it mandated somewhere that we have to belong to these?
To the best of my knowledge, it's not mandated, but I can speak from a personal perspective on the value. We are asked as your administration to stay on top of lots of changes, not just legislative. When the pandemic hit, just a small example, and we first had a CRF grant before the ESSER monies came. They were changing rules, state and federal, almost on a daily and weekly basis, and if it weren't for my own support groups through Connecticut Association of School Business Officials, they are a wealth of information. We have all kinds of professional development opportunities, and I don't know that much about some of the others, like the Institute for Education Innovation. I'm also a member of GFOA, which I know the town is also members of. And I'm sure, Heather, you can speak to some of the organizations that you also are affiliated with and the value.
Yeah, mine are not on here that I'm affiliated with, but I am part of the professional administrators group for directors of special education. And as Pam indicated, each of these has a specialty area. So whichever administrator is tied to these, they're keeping up to date with the national trends. And you are able to, have a network of people to reach out and speak with. I have just slowly been introduced to some of the superintendent's ones through this role, and I will say they have been extremely supportive to help guide me through some of these processes. And without them, I think I would have been a little lost, but I'm sure superintendents that have O93s maybe don't need as much support there, but there is value. There is value to having a network of group to be able to support you to grow here.
And CAVE, is that the annual dues for CAVE, 25,000?
Yes, the CAVE membership, yes.
Yes.
And so 179 districts, 169 districts in the state of Connecticut pay CAVE $25,000.
I think everyone pays slightly different amounts. It's based on the size of the districts.
Okay. Let's go with a couple of questions here. Supplies, you had said all schools receive a per pupil amount for supplies. Is that true with workbooks and textbooks as well?
Correct. It's all the 600 accounts, 611s through the 690s.
And then computer supplies, 119.
Matt's going to speak to that in a moment.
Okay, okay. And page 131. So in 2022, 2023, we spent $735,000 in that line item for furniture and equipment.
700? Oh, total.
Yeah. So, and now we're down to 49,000.
That
I mean,
was,
there was a huge spike that year. Where did that?
that was year-end spending that the board approved. if you recall, it was for signs, and I don't know, is Mr. Ruggiero here? He is not. I would have to get you a breakdown. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's what that funding was, and that all came to the board for approval.
Okay. And so that was some of the spend down of our surplus?
Yes.
And, okay, I remember the signs, there was a smaller amount, but there was some, but all that equipment got, all of that transfer got switched into this line item?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions before we move on to the next section? Now, Mr. Rivers?
Evening, everyone. Pop over to my slide that has all our account numbers. I have the account numbers and the pages, so you can follow along on top. Mostly, we have a lot of zero increases on mainly our hardware lines. A good portion of our increases are all from our software companies. Inflation is still a thing. And it's not just us, it's all school districts get the same increases usually about every 2 to 3 years. The main increases in our maintenance contracts, like I said, let me grab my notes as well. Those are just yearly increases for our virus protection, firewall protection, and our web filtering. Our infrastructure, the increase of $6,000, that is our increase from our network support company. That is our company that we tap into for resources when we have larger network outages or any equipment failure that's on the backbone side. Our VoIP phone system increased a little bit this year, or for the upcoming year. Our computer services, the biggest portion of that, we actually just brought on a new registration platform that went live on Tuesday, I believe. This was a addition to make registration for our schools just a little bit more streamlined for parents, a little easier, a little quicker. And our other larger increase on that 860 line, ClassLink, which we brought on last year, was originally funded out of ESSER. We are moving that into operating. That is a very system-heavy platform. That's our automatic user creation. That's our rostering for all of our different platforms for students and teachers. Great little launch pad for everybody to access to get all of their resources. So that's moving back in. Our larger decrease, thank goodness, our unit prices for our yearly Chromebooks have gone down tremendously. We're actually starting to see a shift where hardware is going down and software is going up. So that's most of our drivers is our software increases for yearly. And take any questions? Yes.
What was used before ClassLink? There was nothing before ClassLink, right?
We did use our accounts by hand.
We did use your account.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And for a district this size, it's a lot of time. Yeah.
I get it.
Yep.
Any other questions for Mr. Rivers?
Just one quick question. So
Mr. Henry?
going from 2021 to 2022, computer supplies on page 119, we went up from 432 to 596. You know what that increase was for?
Computer supplies,
Yeah, page 119. It's about $150,000, $160,000 increase.
Let me just jump back over just so I see.
Are you talking from fiscal year
22 to 23.
2021 to 22, and then 2022 to 2023?
Yeah, I believe that's exactly what that was, from
From,
The replacement of
additional
Chromebooks.
Chromebooks.
yes, that was a shift, from doing our One to Rome program, for the ninth graders as opposed to the seventh graders.
Mhm.
The way that the end of life works for Chromebooks, we got actually extended a few years, so to make sure we get the full life out of our Chromebooks, we started it at grade 7, as opposed to grade 9.
Okay. But then we continued through with that, so is it?
And then we shifted it. If we're talking about the,
So it wasn't just a one-time purchase, it was?
no,
Okay.
that purchase is yearly, but it shifted in between, object, not object line, but, account lines.
So now we're purchasing Chromebooks for 7th graders?
Mhm.
And they carry the same Chromebook through to 12th grade?
Yes. Yep. And obviously, we support them through those.
But we
For
were doing
replacements and
it
repairs.
prior to, for the 9th graders?
Say that again?
We were doing it for the 9th graders prior to that shift?
Yeah, so what we were doing was, at the end, when the 9th graders got to their 12th grade year,
Mhm.
they graduated, we actually recycled those back down through the elementary schools because we didn't have, enough funding to fully fleet our elementary schools. When ESSER came along, that's when we were able to fully outfit our elementary schools. And then we shifted from doing the 9th grade 1-to-1 to the 7th grade 1-to-1 because we got a extended period of time from HP, from when they say end of life, meaning they don't get updates anymore, they're not secure anymore. That got extended, so we can now do our, as opposed to only 4 years, we have 7 years to work with. 6 years, sorry.
I guess.
Any other questions? I have one quick question, if we can jump back to, Matt, I think you're off the hook.
Okay.
Just one quick question, if we can jump back to workbooks for a second. Can somebody tell me what the workbooks are? I think they're mostly at the elementary and middle schools, right?
So, I know there's definitely math workbooks. Alright. So it's farther down on this list than I expected to be. Okay. We have items such as iReady workbooks, we have MyPath, we have math algebra books, for example, at the middle schools. We have, again, most of it is iReady math for the elementary.
Can you tell me where the planners come from? What line item the planners?
Those are instructional supplies, 611.
Okay. Any further questions?
On this or on other?
Well, I'm gonna open it up to the rest of the budget lines and workshops now. If anyone has any follow-up questions from the materials that have been presented to us or anything at all.
So I do, yeah, I've got a couple. You had given us a breakdown, and I'm trying to, these numbers, it's kind of confusing with these books because these numbers are all over the place. I don't know if there's any way to organize them in a more, I mean, you gotta give us the page number to find them, 0757, you gave us a breakdown for 0757. What page is that on?
Okay, I follow you. What we do here in Stratford, which is a little bit different, I had to get accustomed to it as well. We live by those last four numbers, which really don't mean anything anywhere else. It really should be by object code. So the 0757, I too have to go back to see what the object code is, so I can guide you accordingly.
But see, here's the problem, if you don't know where it is, then how do we?
I know where it is.
And as we're going through these budget books, these numbers are all over the place, so if we don't write down the page number,
I think the only thing that what we could do to clarify that is on that left corner, instead of having just the four numbers, you probably need the entire strand, but our strand was added upon. So we'll make it a little bit clearer if it helps, but that is on page 0757. You're in the 300 section. And it is on page 65.
I mean, even if we added 300-0757.
I agree.
What page would that be?
65.
Okay, so we had purchased professional services, which you gave us a breakdown, and the superintendent designated professional services was $75,000. What is, well, there are two items, the culture and accountability support, 5,000, and the superintendent designated professional services, 75,000.
Correct.
And I was looking to get a breakdown as to what that 75 and 5,000, how they were spent.
The 5,000 was newly added for this year, and it was primarily to support the office of the Director of Leadership and Accountability. I always mess that title up a little bit, as well as our DEI, because they absolutely had no other funding anywhere. So the superintendent had put that in last year, and the $75,000 is for items such as a couple of years ago, and I'm gonna forget the name, I have it somewhere, but it was Partners for Education that we brought in. Was that for the strategic plan? We used it for that. We used it for the facility study that the board requested a couple of years ago that Brian Schneider had completed for us. We have used it in the past for items such as we needed an updated enrollment report. Dr. Peter Prada provided that a couple of years ago. And most recently, we used it for our indoor air quality that we are mandated to do, and we've used it this year for support for Tools for Schools. We're working with a consultant to help us. That's mandated. It'll be a 1 year, get us going in the right direction, set up templates so that we can complete all the state reporting accordingly.
So can I get a breakdown of where that line item was spent, you know, all the items you just went through?
Sure, I mean, these are previous years'
Yeah, if I can get it
expenditures.
for previous years as well,
Sure.
as where it's been spent this year.
Okay.
And then I know you had given me a breakdown in the professional development, some of Dr. Sunday's travels. I know in his contract it talks about it's required that he gets approval for any professional development, especially out of state professional development, to be approved by the board. I've been on the board for 2 years. We have not voted on a single professional development yet. He's taken a significant number of trips over the years. You know, some that stood out to me the most were, 200 and, United Airlines, San Francisco, we had booked a couple plane tickets, Shutters Hotel on the beach, room service. Oh. Okay. All right, well, I'm just gonna send this over to our attorney and then have him deal with it, but these are trips that weren't approved by the board, and there's some significant expenditures in there that need to be reconciled, so I'll let the attorneys deal with it.
Any further questions? No?
Quick question,
Mr. Brandon?
page 84.
Tuitions you're referring to, yes?
Yes, the tuition regular, you gave the supplemental information on the number of students. Can you just refine that with, break it out by school and by the budget? I think what I had in the notes here that the increase of 146,000 is due to the increase of number of students, but the supplemental information doesn't show your budget assumptions for 25.
Okay, I'll be happy to provide that.
Anyone else? Mr. O'Brien?
On that same subject, Pam, I think you mentioned the other day, no charge for over 50 students. Is that right?
Correct, I provided the agreement.
It's 3,000 per student for the first 50.
Correct.
Thanks.
There's no further questions. It was a pretty quick presentation tonight. Just want to say that, you know, after conversations with Ms. Mangini, Ms. Borges, the town, it's pretty glaring that we need to reduce some of this budget ask. You know, I think that there's been discussions. I think that everybody is kind of in that mindset. Mr. Pia requested at our last meeting a couple of potential scenarios or potential thoughts to get to scenarios. And Ms. Borges, Ms. Mangini and our teams were kind enough to kind of go over some of those scenarios and thoughts. And I was wondering if you would like to discuss some of those at this point to, which I think are in front of everybody here now, to start thinking about some changes and efficiencies that we could possibly make to our numbers.
Yep, we were asked to, look at some possible scenarios to reduce percentages. I'm gonna restate again, anything that we cut from Stratford does have an impact. That we value our staff, that we value all the hardworking people. So when we are putting scenarios together, we are not forgetting that there are humans behind the scenarios. Humans that work for us and live in Stratford and pay taxes. So I will go over some of those. I just want to make sure that I am honoring all the humans that are working very hard in Stratford to do what's right for our students.
Not to interrupt you.
Mhm.
Obviously, no reductions are favorable at all. We don't want to see any reductions to anything. What we have, do you have a comment? The position we've been put in this year by the ESSER funds over the past several years, and the use of the ESSER funds and how they were put to use by the previous boards are, it's put us in a bad place, and we've been talking about it for a while. Well, now we're here, and it's awful, and no, we don't want to talk about humans. We want to look at everything, and we want to discuss everything we possibly can. We've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to come up with solutions, and well, let's start with where you're.
So based on some recommendations and suggestions, I will start with the scenario, Mr. Pia, that got us down to a 5.5. You had suggested we look at different percentages. We're going to start with things that are not human, okay, we have looked at adding additional savings in retirements. We have found a way to purchase the reading program through other grants, and that is a $400,000 savings. Jump in.
Clarify that that's only part of the cost of science of reading.
Yep.
The portion that we had in the budget for fiscal year
Yes.
25.
And we, as Ms. Mangini spoke, looked at textbook account and are reducing $14,400 there. We are looking at our special education supplies and reducing that down 8,500, and reducing the supplies and office supplies account down 8,360. So those are what we were able to find there. Go ahead.
Will we stop there and ask questions?
Yes.
Please, estimated additional retirement savings, so that is more retirements that you probably have gotten in since the last time we spoke. But does that take into account that if you have a biology teacher who's retiring, you probably can't get a biology teacher at, step 1? You're probably gonna have to go up, higher.
I'm gonna, I'll address that if you don't mind. That's fine. We actually, do take that into consideration, and we had quite a few elementary, so if you recall, when we originally presented the salary portion, we did comment that we had taken over $200,000 in savings at that point. So, excellent point, we do definitely take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Beyond those, in order for us to get lower, we have to start looking at positions and actual jobs and positions. So we have looked through suggestions and looked at our district floating secretary who supports our elementary schools that only have one secretary, so that is a loss for them because that person does float and support multiple different locations. Greeter positions, and those, we really felt okay about because the town is building traps for us, and so once those are built, we won't need the greeters. And we have gotten some pretty good assurance that those will be built by the end of the summer. Go ahead.
How many are left to be built?
3. Well, there's 3 greeter positions, 2 left to be built.
2 left to be built. Track west. Thank you.
We have looked at our administrative union and thought about setting a standard that states that if you have less than 300 students in your elementary school, that we would only have a principal and a lead teacher and reduce an assistant principal. Equity-wise, at some point in Stratford, we gave every elementary school an assistant principal, and as you're aware through the SLAM study, our elementary schools have multiple different sizes. Will that impact? Yes, right? Because when you have 2 administrators, one can be in PPTs, one's out in the building. So these are all going to have an impact, but in order for us to get to a 5.5, I see no other locations for us to look at except for staff through the staff recommendations. Another very difficult recommendation is for us to look at our library media teachers. There's no state mandate or regulation for us to teach specific media or library. So we could reduce there and replace with tutors so students could still have access to the library, but you are losing those professionals that have that media experience, and that is difficult. And then the same thing for the high schools. If you guys remember, we already removed the media specialist from the middle schools, so there's only high school and elementary left. The middle school medias were removed and replaced with tutors, so we would be looking at the same thing. That's about 1.4 million, 1.5 million, and that gets us to the 5.5, and that's the first scenario. Go ahead.
Just going back up to the 400,000 for the grant you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Are you projecting that in this hypothetical as a 1-year grant?
So I'm hopeful that the state will be listening to everybody advocating that if you're mandating a reading program, you'll also fund it.
That's where I was going with them. I'm hopeful too.
Yeah, we're hopeful for that, but right now we have some grant funds in other locations we can look at to get us through this first year. If the state doesn't come through with funding, that would be put back in for future years.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Kramer?
Thank you. Ms. Borges, when you say media tutors, are you talking about paraprofessionals?
No, we're talking about tutors.
Tutors.
Yeah,
Are
the
they?
CIAs cannot be alone with children.
Right,
So
that was the
certified
question.
tutors can.
So this would cover like the classroom teachers who
Yes.
would cover the specials, the
Yes. It would
times,
still allow us to use library to cover specials.
but they wouldn't have the specialization of
There would
teaching
not be a
research.
curriculum and
Research, yeah.
instruction. It would be more of traditional, where you come in, maybe have a story read to you, and you are taking out books and learning how to use the library that way.
Ms. Lance?
Do we have any data, from when we eliminated the library, media specialists in, the middle school? Do we know if as many teachers took advantage of going into the library with their classes? Do we have any hard data about that?
I am happy to reach out to the middle school principals. I haven't received any data in the contrary, that they're not able to access the media center with tutors there.
Okay.
But I can reach out to them and ask if they have a difference in their access to the library.
That's what I'd like to know.
Absolutely, and we can send you that in writing.
Thank you.
Mr. Brandon?
Just looking at the two FTE high school library teachers that will add media tutors. Can you walk me through the 150, the negative 150? I read this, you would have to add media tutors, but where's the add for the media tutors?
Those particular positions, right now are at the very top salary, and based on certifications and a couple of other things, we could absorb them based on that dollar amount. We usually, when we reduce positions, we usually assume a $60,000 savings because of bumping.
Yep.
And then we add a little bit, estimate for health insurance. So that's where the 150 came from, and we felt with these particular positions, there were some nuances there, so that's why it just absorbed the media.
I heard you right, you're grossing 60,000 per position plus some benefits of, that's 120, and then the 30 for the 30 for benefits.
Right.
I'm still just getting lost on where the media tutors get.
What I'm
funded.
trying to say is those particular, I think it was those positions, and I could have been misspeaking.
There may be less
feel
potential for
bumping,
bumping to get
yeah.
down to the 60, so there'll be possibly more savings in those positions.
And then you'll use that to pay for the tutors?
Yes.
Any additional questions?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Pan?
Mr. Borges, the 75,000 for the estimated retirement, that's, you wrote there, that's known intent as of February 21st. And I know we talked about this a couple of meetings ago. The date is, forgive me, it's April 15th, or when is the?
April 1st.
First, okay. So that number's, we'll have a pretty good number on April 1st. And do you anticipate that increasing?
Potentially it could, it has in the past, it could also decrease.
Right.
Because sometimes they.
Change their mind.
So it's safe to say that's a moving line item that all of us will be able to really look at hard with actual numbers past April 1st.
And I think it's important just to note in general, when we're making cuts, we're making assumptions about what we're gonna save.
Right.
And there is, unions involved and bumping processes involved, and, even with retirements, again, we may not be able to hire a teacher at step one and realize any of that savings. So we are making a large amount of assumptions, and I lean towards making sure we're making safe ones.
Understood.
Okay. Do you want to keep going with the?
I don't.
I know, none of us do, it's not.
Yep.
I have one more question, I'm sorry.
Ms. Lynn?
I'm thinking about this in my head. So if we eliminate those 9 positions, can you reiterate what will happen to those people as far as,
They're currently in the teachers union.
right, so they will be able to what?
If they have appropriate certifications and qualifications, they go through the teachers union, through the bumping process, and possibly take other positions, or they seek other districts if they don't want to teach in a classroom.
Thank you.
This next scenario really hits us hard, and I think that is really important for everyone to note, and I'm a little uncomfortable with it, and I would not be me if I didn't say that. Again, everything we already went over. Okay, so when you look at the next scenario, you have to think of the whole first scenario, and then these additional things would really hit home. So, and this one Pam might jump in and talk a little bit about, because when we talk about our math and reading coaches, they are partially funded out of Title I as well, so they're not just in the operating budget. So you'll see 3.7 math coaches plus their benefits, and 15.2 reading coaches plus their benefits, and then the reduction of 2 supervisors that have counterparts as department heads. And that would bring you to your 4.3, which again, that's not something I would openly say right now that I would support. it's extremely impactful.
Ms. Mangini, anything to add to that?
No, other than as Ms. Burgess indicated, we do have some coaches that are funded through Title I. And that money would more than likely be repurposed as well. But I will tell you that each year we struggle with the title grants and the IDEA grants in maintaining the same level of staffing because obviously wages increase every year. We have people in positions that not only get their general wage increase, but they're also getting step increases. And I know that.
Title I and IDA just don't account for those kind
Exactly.
of changes, so
We
that's
certainly
always.
aren't getting the same amount of increase that we need. So I don't want anyone to walk away thinking, well, we're gonna have all this money now in Title I to repurpose, because I don't think it's gonna be quite as much.
And if we did have money, we would repurpose for interventionists. They are a vital part of what we do every day. And Chris, to be honest, that was the last one I could do. I know you had asked for 3, but this was where
It was
I.
more of just a starting point for,
Mhm.
to see something, right? And thank you for the work you did.
Heather, if we eliminate 3.7 math coaches, how would the elementary schools look with how many math coaches are there in total?
Sam, would you mind?
There are 9 currently.
9.
We just added a new one to the grant for Second Hill Lane, given the high need. So that,
Okay, so if we eliminate 3.7, what kind of service will what kind of services will the students be getting?
very minimal, because you now have to look at from an equity lens based on, multi-tier sports needs. We also not only service students, we also build capacity within the classroom. Not only just regular ed, but also special education as well.
We'd have to really look at the structures. We'd have to analyze how many students in each school are requiring intervention and service. You would also then have to factor in travel time, because people would be covering more than one building, which would impact the amount of minutes that we have in front of students. But we have more buildings than we would have math coaches left.
And then let's talk about reading coaches. How many reading coaches are there now?
In the elementary?
Oh, I don't know.
Yes, this is elementary.
The elimination, is that elementary or everything?
Yes, you need to remember at middle school and high school for reading, they actually teach classes. So none of the reductions that I mentioned at all in either of these 2 scenarios impact classes that are run in your kindergarten class teachers, your middle school class teachers, and our reading teachers at the middle and high school teach classes.
Okay, so how many elementary reading coaches do we have?
We have 17 elementary reading teachers.
So the coaches are teachers, or do they have any addition, are they consultants, are they?
Both. Every single building has a reading teacher that is certified with a 097, their consultant, and a 102, a remedial reading teacher. And they service students in our tiered intervention, our EL students, our special education students, and our students in tiered intervention, as well as going into the classroom and supporting the classroom teacher.
So we would only have 1.8 left, correct? If my math is right.
In the operating budget. No, in the,
No, that would be in Title I,
In
but
Title I.
I believe, I don't know if the plan was to keep them in Title I, or if we were looking to possibly handle that entire support differently.
yes, if we had to go to a scenario like this, we would have to look at all of our grant funding, because we need interventionists. There has to be a level of intervention for our students. We are an Alliance district, so we would have to look at the Alliance grant and other grants in order to have a number of interventionists. We wouldn't have this number of interventionists because there's not enough grant funding for us to do that.
What about looking at, non-certified positions like tutors or,
So we,
or other accounts like,
I can speak to tutors. We eliminated all ESSER tutors already, so that was 32 of them. The tutors you see that remain in the operating budget are part of your specialized programs, and that they're required by IEPs, and they're part of our ABA programs. Those are your tutors. So I don't see the availability for you to eliminate those in the operating budget. We did move 12 tutors to Alliance. But again, I think the focus of this committee should be what you're looking at for the operating budget. The Alliance approval for the board comes after this. And those can always be, talked about at that point in time. But right now, the operating budget tutors are special education tutors in your ABA programs, your STEPS programs, your sales program, and they're essentially part of your students' IEPs.
And Heather, can you clarify that in order to be a tutor, except for the ESSER issues that we've had with the pandemic, they are certified teachers, correct?
Stratford, the state does not require that, but in Stratford, we always look for our certified tutors first. And even in the reduction, we're looking to try to keep as many of the certified tutors as possible.
And they get no benefits or anything, they just get salary? Not even salary, they get per hour.
Do you want to speak to that, Pam? That's accurate? Okay.
That's accurate.
I don't want
They
to
get
say yes
offered
to something.
benefits, but it's usually at no cost to the district.
Not difficult, not conversations that we obviously want to have, very difficult conversations to have. Anybody have any other thoughts before we, Mr. Hendrick?
So, I know we had talked about our certified substitute salary line item. We went from about 877 to 1.43. And you had provided us with some information on our teacher fill rates. Prior to KES, our fill rate was at 62.26, and with KES, our fill rate is 64.16. Numerically speaking, that's not a big increase for a $500,000 line item increase. I don't know how we justify that number, and going back, I think, to our, I think somewhere near you provided us with our current expenditure in that line item, which seemed to be quite a bit below that 1.4 million.
I think there might be some confusion. I'm probably not providing it as clear as I should have. But the information that we provided you, again, I caution you about looking at actuals and comparing them to budget. Because again, I'll remind you that during COVID, in fiscal year 21, we probably felt it a bit in 20 since we closed down in March. Fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23, we struggled to get substitutes. In those first 2 years of the pandemic, we didn't hire interns. We didn't have building subs. So we also were doing a hybrid schedule, so we didn't have the need for substitute teachers the way we would if we were in school 5 days a week. So for a variety of reasons, you're seeing a very low amount for those years in actuals. If you look at the actual on what I had provided for fiscal year 2019, you'll see that we were close to $1.2 million. That was the last real year that we had prior to the pandemic. And bear in mind that since that time, our minimum wage increased significantly, so we had to increase the daily rate, which is how we came up with the 1.4. Last year, I did provide an explanation to the board about our certified substitute cost. And what we determined was the actual dollar amount that is in that 1.4 million that is primarily just for daily subs is only about $400,000. The rest are for building subs and the intern program. And we also factored in at that time for the Kelly services vendor a fee of approximately about $130,000. Again, an estimate because we didn't know what their fill rate would be, and they are charging a percentage. So for all those reasons, I just wanted to be really clear that no, we are not getting like a 3% increase in our fill rate for $500,000 because we too would be very concerned about that.
Well,
But the 1.4 million, again, is a very reasonable amount to expect us to expend for substitutes. And I think we will be very close to that this year because we were halfway there, more than halfway. And our biggest times for substitutes are usually in the spring. We do have a job.
well, with Kelly Services, we have a 64% fill rate, and that's for a 4-month period. And for Proxy, it says 7/1/23 to 11/3/23, which is basically 2 months of the school year. We have a 62.26. So those are actual numbers, and those are the actual numbers that I use.
Yeah, no, I'm not
because it's-
disputing that, and just what I'm clarifying is that Kelly Services isn't costing us $500,000. It's costing us what we expected to be over what we would have paid without Kelly Services, is about $125,000.
I think, Pam, what you're saying is that it also pays for our interns and for our building subs.
That account does, yes.
I appreciate conservativeness but I'd much rather see that number or a percentage of that come down as opposed to letting go another teacher.
And that definitely is the board's prerogative. We are just sharing the information
No,
with
I
you.
understand.
We
I
really
just-
struggled with filling subs, and Kelly is, not just Kelly, there's other services out there that have been very value added to districts. But whatever you choose to do.
It seems to be a struggling area though, all over the state, or all over the country
Yeah,
even.
it's a shortage
not-
right
I agree.
Yeah, it's, so the fill rate, I mean, maybe we're not getting what it's worth right now because that is a national problem right now,
Very
so.
well, maybe.
And then, so for the line, for the object 100, 200, you had given us also a chart. And it would seem over the years, we've carried a fairly significant surplus in that line item year after year, starting to 2019. And I understand that, we had some shortages in years past because of COVID, but that number seems to be pretty significant year after year. So historically speaking, it would seem we over budget in that area. And again, being conservative is one thing, but creating large surpluses is another, so.
I do have to comment on that. I do not believe that we over budgeted in those areas. I think it's the obligation of us as the administration to come to the board with a reasonable budget. I feel that's our responsibility, a real budget. And it is, per state statute, the board's responsibility not to run a deficit in their budget. So we do budget for every single board-approved position. And as I've said for the past 3 years, the monies remaining in salaries and benefits have been because of unfilled positions. To Kristen's earlier comment, it is a national issue, and the pandemic just made that very trying through fiscal years 21, 22, 23. And 20. And quite frankly, in fiscal year 19, if you really look at the total picture, please bear in mind that in fiscal year 19, the board did not have a balance. They ended the year at 0. And the reason you're seeing those balances in the 100s and 200s, as my note indicates, is because there was some issue with a change in personnel in my position. So the board did not even receive a budget that year. So our illustrious, yes, I am giving Susan Nicholson kudos again, had to take the town-approved amount and simply do the best she could with the budget based on whatever we had at fiscal year 18. So unfortunately, some of those line items were skewed, and that's why you're seeing fiscal year 19 as some monies remaining, but again, please know that there was no money remaining that year.
But it just, again, it's a line item that's, never mind, okay.
Just to follow up to that, Ms. Brown, can I have an updated list of the positions that aren't filled at this point? I know I've asked for it, you provided it every couple of months or so if I could get that update, that would be great. Any other questions? Mr. O'Brien?
Going back to the library teachers, their salaries come to $232,000. Is that difference between $150,000 to pay for the tutors?
Primarily, yes.
And then what about central office? Have we looked at that at all?
It's on your 4.2, the 4.3
Under the
recommendation.
second scenario.
It's on your second scenario.
Scenario?
Yep.
Anything further? If there's nothing further, then Ms. Carpenter?
Yeah. Looking at the presentation of the 5.5 and the 4.37, I would be remiss if I did not express my strong disagreement with the presentation of budget asks of 5.5 and 4.37. They fail to represent our school's true needs accurately. The mere suggestion of cutting staff who directly support our students and their ever-growing needs is deeply troubling to me. The thought of depriving our students of the vital social, emotional, and educational supports that they require is not only distressing, but unacceptable. I reject any budget proposal that would undermine the well-being and progress of our schools. Our students deserve better, and it's our duty to ensure that they receive the resources and assistance necessary to thrive. Our duty is to prioritize the educational needs of our students and advocate for a fiscally responsible budget. We need to ensure our schools have the resources to provide the best education possible. It's not about shaving down essential services to fit a certain number. It's about ensuring that our schools have the resources necessary to provide the best possible education for our children. Anything less is a disservice to our community and our responsibility as educational stewards.
Thank you for that. Mr. Pia?
So, I don't have a prepared statement, but, what all of us are asked to do, elect to do, what have you, is to look at this in a logical, factual way based off of expenses of the overall town. So, thank you, Ms. Borges, for putting this together. Logically, every board or private or municipal has to do this. The first $506,330, again, we just talked this out, this is logical. I've always said for years, being on the town council now here, if we can take if we can take advantage of opportunities of grants, why wouldn't we? It's from the state or the federal government. So things like that are exactly what I was hoping to see from this to get the conversation started. The estimated 75,000, we all know that's gonna come down, right? These are starting points for us to have this conversation. So I think this is great to start because factually and logically, this is how you have to look at any line item budget. I just want to say that. Thank you.
Are there any further comments?
Yes, please.
Ms. D'Angelo Powers?
I was watching the curriculum last night and they brought up the new reading program. I know that Connecticut, nationally as well, struggles with literacy. I believe cutting from the librarians as well as the reading specialists is going to be detrimental to our community, as well as bringing in this new reading program. One of the suggestions was if we bring in a child from another district or coming back from outplacement, they're going to be they're in a different reading program. And they said that they would put them with a reading specialist to help counter that. If we're doing away with all our elementary reading specialists and leaving only 2 in the district, how is that going to look?
Do you want to respond to that, or is there a response to that?
I mean, the response is what we've already said. So we know intervention is important, and we will continue to look at grants, Title I and other funding to continue to have interventionists to support our students.
Again, like I said before, I don't think any reductions are favorable to any of our district, any staff. That's why we've asked about grants, about other ways to cut from the substitute lines or from other accounts. I mean, staff is obviously not the first thing we want to look at, or anybody wants to look at. All districts are looking at the same thing right now. You know, that doesn't mean that we're in any different position or, you know, that it's gonna be any better or worse for us. But we're all in that ESSER cliff right now, and again, this is something that we've been talking about for quite a few years now, at least 3, and we've been warned about, and I think that, you know, unfortunately, this is a difficult year, and we knew that coming into it. And if there are, yeah, Mr. Reiner?
First, I just wanted to say that, Ms. Borges, I don't envy your position. I know you got thrust into this, and I appreciate all the hard work and deliberation you put in this, the thoughtfulness, the scenarios. I know it was not easy. We have talked about efficiencies, running our school in a more efficient manner for a number of years. As a business owner, we do that every year. We're forced to look at how to better run our business year after year. Changing the model we use, because the model we use is not always the one that works best. We just came out of a year with ESSER grants, 3 years of ESSER grants, approximately, I think, $25 million in that ballpark. We had a huge opportunity to do some wonderful things. I personally think that opportunity was squandered. We pushed a number of regular education budget positions into that ESSER, which forced us to make some of those positions. In my belief, it's been a lack of leadership, not a lack of dollars, and that leadership should have brought us better efficiencies in a more timely manner, but it hasn't. So we're in this position where we're gonna be forced to make some decisions, but year after year, we have to do that, whether it's in our home, our business, whatever it is. It's an ongoing process for everybody, and we are elected to be leaders, and unfortunately, we have to make some hard decisions from time to time. I wish things were done differently in the past, and I had said that 2 years ago when when the council forced us to find $2.5 million, and we did it in our superintendent's words, re-engineering to find better efficiencies. And my question at that time was, why didn't we do that before we sent the budget over? My opinion, the board was just lazy and didn't want to do the work. Should have been done before we sent it over. And now we're doing some of that work. We're forced to do the work that wasn't done in the past, and because of that, we're in a hard position. So it hurts all of us, and I'm just sorry that we have to go through this, and I wish things had been done differently in the past, but we are where we are. We can no longer kick the can down the road, and we can no longer bury our heads in the sands. We need to run a more efficient operation. This is our house, and we need to fix it. Thank you.
There's nothing further. Take a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn by Mr. Fia, second by Mr. Henrik. Thank you, everybody.